Marcus cleaned out his desk on a Friday. His director had pulled him into a glass-walled huddle room 2 days earlier, right after the morning stand-up, while the rest of the sales floor was still pouring coffee. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. Resign now or enter a structured coaching plan with weekly check-ins and documented milestones. Those were the two options. Nothing else was presented. Marcus had been at the logistics company for 4.5 years. He'd been promoted once, from associate account executive to senior rep. He'd received a spot bonus the previous December for closing the largest Q4 contract in his region. His last 3 performance reviews had landed in the meets or exceeds expectations column. Not once had his manager raised a concern in writing. The coaching plan appeared without a single prior conversation. His director leaned back in the chair and said, "I'm giving you the chance to control the narrative. Future employers won't see a termination, they'll see a clean exit. That matters more than you think." Marcus thanked him, shook his hand, walked to the parking lot, and emailed his resignation from the front seat of his car before he'd turned the key. What Marcus never saw was the Slack message his director sent to the VP of People Operations 11 minutes after he left the huddle room. It read, "Voluntary, no separation needed. Can we backfill with a contract role at lower comp?" The VP reacted with a checkmark emoji and forwarded the thread to payroll with a single line. "Cut final check, terminate benefits, end of current pay cycle, close headcount." No one from HR reached out to Marcus. No one asked if he had questions. No exit interview was scheduled. Marcus's resignation saved the company somewhere between $22,000 and $34,000. He didn't know this. He wouldn't for almost 3 months. The calculation is straightforward, but it's the calculation almost nobody runs before they walk away. In the United States, when an employee resigns, the company owes nothing beyond the final paycheck and, depending on state law, a payout of accrued unused vacation time. California, Illinois, Massachusetts, and a handful of other states mandate that payout. Most don't. That's it. No severance, no negotiation, no transitional support. The employee also forfeits eligibility for unemployment insurance. In all 50 states, unemployment benefits require that the separation be involuntary. A resignation is, by legal definition, voluntary. The employee chose to leave. It doesn't matter that the choice was presented in a 9-minute meeting with no prior warning, no HR representative present, and no written documentation. It doesn't matter that the only alternative was a plan designed to generate a paper trail of failure. None of that changes the classification. You resigned. You chose it. And choosing it means you walk away with nothing the company wasn't already obligated to give you. When the company terminates you, the equation inverts. In the U.S., severance is not legally required in most states, but it is standard practice at mid-size and large employers, and it becomes especially likely when the company wants something from you on the way out. Unemployment benefits become available immediately. In most states, weekly unemployment pays between $300 and $823 depending on your prior earnings, and it lasts up to 26 weeks. Some states extend that during periods of high unemployment. All accrued PTO is paid out. Health insurance continuation under COBRA is triggered, which means you keep your existing coverage for up to 18 months. The premiums are steep, often $600 to $900 a month for an individual plan, but in stronger severance packages, the company covers a portion of the COBRA premium for 60, 90, or even 180 days. Letters of recommendation can be negotiated into the separation agreement. So can outplacement services, career coaching, resume reviews, interview preparation, job placement assistance, all funded by the employer. All of it completely unavailable to the person who resigned. A 2024 report from the Society for Human Resource Management estimated that the median total cost to a U.S. company of an involuntary separation, including severance payouts, benefits continuation, unemployment insurance contributions, and administrative processing, falls between 33% and 45% of the departing employee's annual base salary. For someone making $95,000 a year, that's between $31,000 and $43,000 the company would rather not spend. That is the number behind the huddle room conversation. That is why Marcus's director called it controlling the narrative. The narrative he was controlling wasn't Marcus's, it was the company's. The coaching plan was never about coaching. It was a paper trail with a deadline. The structured plan Marcus was offered ran 45 days. It listed 5 performance milestones. The first required Marcus to hit revenue benchmarks tied to a client portfolio that had been quietly reassigned to another rep 2 weeks before the meeting. He was never told about the reassignment. The second and third milestones depended on deliverables from the analytics team, which had been operating at half capacity since February due to a company-wide hiring freeze. 2 of the 5 goals referenced cross-functional collaboration with a product team that had stopped responding to internal requests during a launch sprint. The milestones were scoped for a full quarter. Marcus was given a month. If he had accepted the plan, he would have spent 45 days building a documented record of failure against targets the company had already made structurally impossible to reach. At the end of those 45 days, he would have been terminated for cause. In most U.S. organizations, termination for cause means no severance, a contested unemployment claim that could take months to resolve, and a separation record that reads performance-based dismissal instead of voluntary resignation. The coaching plan wasn't designed to help Marcus. It was designed to make his termination look like his fault.
The coaching plan was not the alternative to quitting. It was the mechanism for making a firing look justified. The real alternative, the one nobody brought up in the huddle room, was a third path Marcus didn't know existed. He could have said no to both. No to the resignation, no to the coaching plan. He could have walked back to his desk, opened his laptop, and kept doing the job he'd been doing for 4.5 years. In the United States, employment is at will in 49 out of 50 states. The company can terminate you at any time for any reason that isn't legally protected. But if they do it without cause, it's an involuntary separation. And an involuntary separation triggers everything: severance negotiation, unemployment eligibility, COBRA activation, PTO payout, the entire package. Companies avoid this outcome not because they can't afford it, but because the huddle room conversation is cheaper. Every resignation they secure is a severance package they never have to write. That 9-minute meeting exists for one reason: to make sure the layoff never has to happen. A colleague of Marcus's, a woman named Lauren, who sat 3 desks away on the same sales floor, was called into the same huddle room 5 weeks later. Same director, same glass walls, same script: resign or accept the coaching plan. Lauren listened to the full pitch without interrupting. When her director finished, she didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said she appreciated him walking her through it and asked if she could take the weekend to think it over. He said of course. That evening, Lauren called an employment attorney she'd found through her state bar association's referral line. The consultation cost her $250. The attorney reviewed her last 3 performance evaluations, all positive, and her most recent compensation adjustment, a 4% raise approved just 7 months earlier. He told her that issuing a coaching plan to an employee with a consistent record of strong reviews and a recent pay increase would be very difficult for the company to justify if the situation ever escalated to mediation or litigation. Lauren went back to her director's office Monday morning. She kept her tone even. She said she wasn't comfortable with either option and would prefer to continue in her current role. She offered to discuss any specific performance concerns he had and address them directly. Her director said he'd need to loop in HR. 4 days later, the company laid Lauren off. The separation agreement arrived by email that afternoon. It included 8 weeks of base salary, 4 months of employer-subsidized COBRA coverage, a full payout of her accrued PTO totaling 56 hours, a written letter of recommendation co-signed by her direct manager and the VP of People Operations, and a 30-day outplacement support package through a third-party firm.
Lauren did not sign the agreement that week. She printed it out, read it twice over 2 evenings, and highlighted every clause she wanted to revisit. Then she drafted a short, professional email to the HR business partner assigned to her case. She acknowledged the offer and said she appreciated the company's willingness to provide a transition package. She outlined the scope of her active client accounts, 3 of which were mid-renewal cycle, and noted that she was prepared to complete a clean handoff. She said 8 weeks did not reflect the realistic timeline she'd need to find comparable employment in a tightening market, particularly in logistics, where hiring cycles average 6 to 10 weeks for senior roles. She asked for 12 weeks. HR replied the next morning. The response was 2 lines. Severance was calculated using a standard formula based on tenure and role level. It was company policy. Lauren wrote back the same afternoon. She said she understood the policy and respected the structure behind it. She also mentioned, without going into detail, that she had consulted with an employment attorney who had raised some questions about the timing and basis of the coaching plan relative to her most recent performance review and compensation adjustment. She said she was prepared to move forward cooperatively and wanted to keep the process professional for both sides. She did not threaten, she did not demand. She stated facts and left space. 3 days of silence. Then HR called. They couldn't do 12 weeks, but they could do 10. Extend the COBRA subsidy by an additional month to 5 months total, and upgrade the outplacement package from 30 days to 90. Lauren said that worked. She signed on a Tuesday. Here is the part no one explains to you while you still have leverage. Severance is not a gift, it is a purchase. The separation agreement is not just buying your departure, it is buying your silence. Nearly every package issued by a U.S. employer includes 3 things: a non-disparagement clause that prevents you from saying anything negative about the company publicly or privately, a confidentiality provision that bars you from disclosing the terms of your own agreement, and a general release of all legal claims, meaning you waive your right to sue for wrongful termination, discrimination, retaliation, or anything else. The company is paying you to agree that you will not sue, not post, not talk, and not disrupt. That agreement has a price, and until your name is on the signature line, you are the one who determines what that price is. The fear that negotiating will cause the company to pull the offer is almost never justified. Think about it from their side. An ex-employee with no severance, no NDA, and no release of claims is a completely uncontrolled variable. They can post on Glassdoor. They can message former clients on LinkedIn. They can file a complaint with the EEOC. They can talk to reporters. Companies know this. Their legal teams know this. Pulling an offer from someone who has nothing to lose and no agreement in place creates exponentially more risk than adjusting the number upward by 2 or 3 weeks. The math always favors paying a little more to close the file cleanly. HR will tell you the severance number is fixed. They told Lauren it was fixed. She later found out that another rep on her team, same title, same level, nearly identical tenure, had received a completely different figure during a restructuring the previous year. The formula is a line they are trained to deliver. It is a negotiation tactic dressed up as a policy. It is not a wall. Marcus didn't know any of this, not because he was careless, not because he lacked intelligence, but because nobody teaches it. There is no onboarding module at any company in America that says, here is how severance works and here is what to do if we ever try to push you out. There is no section in the employee handbook explaining your right to decline a PIP or negotiate your exit. There is no HR training session that covers the difference between resigning and being laid off from the employee's perspective. The information gap is not a bug in the system, it is the system. The company knows exactly what your resignation saves them. They know it to the dollar. You are expected to never ask. Marcus found out what Lauren received about 7 weeks after his last day. She mentioned it on a phone call, almost in passing, between updates about her job search and a question about a mutual friend. The severance weeks, the 5 months of health coverage, the unemployment claim that was approved within 2 weeks without a single challenge from the company, the outplacement coach who helped her rewrite her resume and prep for 3 interviews. She wasn't gloating, she genuinely thought he already knew. She assumed he'd gone through the same process and gotten a similar package. He hadn't. He'd gotten nothing. And by then, 3 months removed from a resignation he sent from a parking lot, there was nothing left to negotiate. There was no agreement to reopen, there was no leverage to use. The door had closed the moment he hit send on that email. The next time someone pulls you into a room and tells you that resigning lets you control the narrative, ask yourself one question. Whose narrative are you actually protecting?